It's terrible that after 50 years it is behind closed doors. And I've no intention, now I've started to stop now. I'm determined to put an end to this. Terrible.
The room had been prepared for silence, duty, and tradition. But within minutes, that silence shattered. King Charles entered expecting a solemn reading tied to private royal inheritance, only to freeze when he noticed Camilla's personal solicitor seated inside the room. What followed was not a delay. It was a royal command. The will reading was cancelled on the spot, and everyone present understood one terrifying truth. Trust had just collapsed. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles did not raise his voice at first. He did not need to. The king simply stopped near the head of the table, his eyes fixed on the man who should not have been there. And the entire chamber seemed to understand that something sacred had been disturbed. Camilla looked toward him, then toward her personal solicitor, and the queen consort's face tightened with the panic of someone realizing too late that a private choice had become a public wound. William noticed it instantly. The prince had watched palace tension before, but this was different. This was not gossip. This was not family discomfort. This was a breach inside the most private circle of royal trust. Charles knew what the will reading meant. A will reading is the formal moment when chosen legal officials share the instructions left inside an inheritance document, and in royal life, that kind of paper does not only carry money or property. It can carry legacy, power, family promises, and the quiet map of who is trusted after death. That was why the chamber had been secured. That was why Princess Anne had been present. Anne understood duty better than sentiment, and she watched the king's hand move toward the sealed folder, then stop before he opened it. In that small refusal, she saw the truth. The monarch no longer believed the process was clean. Camilla tried to speak, but the first words did not come easily. She looked wounded, almost offended, yet Charles did not soften. The king turned from her to the solicitor and asked why he had been allowed inside a royal family matter without direct permission. The man lowered his gaze. Camilla shifted in her chair. William saw the empty place where an official crown advisor should have been seated, and the prince understood the danger with chilling speed. Someone had not merely entered the room. Someone had been positioned to listen before the reading even began. Charles made the decision in one breath. He cancelled the will reading immediately. The king ordered the solicitor removed, then instructed every document to be taken from the table until the access list could be checked. Anne remained still, but her silence cut harder than accusation. Camilla watched one envelope being lifted away, and William caught the change in her expression before she could hide it. That envelope mattered, and once it disappeared from the room, the question was no longer what the will contained. It was who had been trying to hear it first. No royal crisis begins with shouting. It begins with people looking at one another differently. Around that table, every glance carried history, every silence carried suspicion, and every chair held someone with something to lose. Charles was not just a king guarding a document. Camilla was not just a wife caught off guard. William was not just an heir watching from the side. In that room, everyone became exposed. Charles felt the full weight of the monarchy pressing down on him. The king understood that private order is what keeps royal life from breaking into chaos, because behind every family decision sits the bigger question of who protects the crown when emotions turn dangerous. The crown means the monarchy itself, the royal authority, public duty, and family structure joined together in one powerful institution. That was why this moment mattered. A mistake around inheritance could wound more than feelings. It could damage trust, legacy, and the image of control the palace spends a lifetime protecting. Camilla knew her position depended on more than a title. The queen consort had stood beside Charles through years of judgment, but now she was facing something colder than public criticism. She was facing doubt from the man whose trust had made her secure. Her lips moved as if she wanted to explain, yet the hesitation betrayed her before the words could save her. The solicitor's presence might have been called a misunderstanding, but in that room, misunderstanding sounded too small for what had happened. William watched his father with careful eyes. The prince could feel the old pressure of succession rising again, because succession means the line of people expected to inherit the throne, and every crisis around Charles would one day land at William's feet. He saw the king fighting two battles at once, one as a husband wounded by Camilla, and one as a monarch forced to protect the system from private influence. The future king did not speak too quickly. He knew one wrong word could turn suspicion into open war. Anne made no dramatic move, and that made her disappointment even sharper. The princess had seen enough palace storms to know when silence carried more power than anger. She looked at Camilla once, then looked away, and the distance in that gesture felt final. A courtier quietly stepped forward and confirmed that the solicitor's name had not appeared on the original attendance list. Charles absorbed the words without blinking, but something in his expression hardened. Someone had changed the arrangement. Someone had opened the door. Camilla insisted it had been a mistake, but her pause came first. William noticed it. Anne noticed it. Charles noticed it most of all. The king asked who had authorized the solicitor's access, and no one answered. For a few seconds, the room held its breath. That pause became the first true sign that this was not only about one unwanted man at one table. It was about a deeper breach, a hidden hand, and an older wound waiting beneath the surface. But the real danger was not the silence around the table. It was the older wound that had made this moment possible. Every royal rupture has a beginning people ignore until it is too late. For Charles, the warning had come weeks earlier, not in a courtroom or council chamber, but at a private dinner where a single question changed the temperature of the family. It was spoken softly, almost politely. Yet the moment Camilla asked about provisions connected to private royal inheritance, William stopped eating. Anne looked up, and Charles finally understood the conversation had crossed a line. Charles had wanted that dinner to feel calm. The king had gathered only the closest family voices, hoping the evening would settle old worries before the formal will reading. Clarence House, one of the royal residences used for private family meetings, was supposed to offer privacy, not pressure. That was why the moment mattered. Camilla was not speaking in front of the public. She was speaking where trust should have been strongest, and her question landed like a quiet warning inside the room. Camilla asked whether certain personal provisions could be reviewed before the will reading. The queen consort made it sound careful, even gentle, but William heard something sharper beneath it. A provision means a specific instruction or condition written inside a legal document, and in this case, it touched the private royal inheritance Charles had not yet fully shared. The prince lowered his fork because he understood the risk. If Camilla knew too much, then someone had told her too much. And if someone had told her too much, the family's sealed world was already leaking. William felt unease before anyone else named it. The future king knew inheritance was not only about property. It was about protection, legacy, and what Charles wanted preserved for the next generation. Camilla saw the silence and felt wounded by it. She had spent years beside the king, yet in that instant, she believed they were looking at her like an outsider again. Her pain was real, but so was the suspicion rising around her. Anne did not forget the wording. Later, the princess told Charles in a private recorded conversation that the dinner had not been harmless, because Camilla had named a clause only a small circle should have known. A clause is one exact part of a legal paper, and that one detail changed everything. The king listened without interrupting. Anne repeated the phrase Camilla had used, and Charles finally understood why the room had gone cold that night. Charles asked a palace aide to trace the language. The aide found it inside a legal memo meant only for the approved royal team, suggesting someone outside the proper circle had been briefed. Camilla had not revealed everything at dinner, but she had revealed enough. By the time the will reading arrived, the king was already watching for signs of interference. And when Camilla's solicitor appeared inside that secured room, Charles knew the fear planted at Clarence's house had followed him all the way to the locked chamber doors. So when those doors opened for the reading, he was not walking into a ceremony, he was walking into a test. The confrontation did not begin with rage. It began with Charles closing the door. No aides, no advisors, no polite palace buffer. Just the king, Camilla, William, and Anne in a room suddenly too small for the truth. Charles placed the sealed folder on a side table, looked directly at Camilla, and asked one question that stripped away every title in the room. Why was he there? Charles waited, and the silence made the question heavier. The king had cancelled the will reading only minutes earlier, and a will reading means the formal sharing of instructions left inside an inheritance document. In royal life, that moment matters because it can touch family property, future control, private promises, and the trust that keeps the monarchy steady. Camilla understood that immediately. She looked at him as a wife first, but he was no longer asking as a husband. He was asking as the monarch whose private process had been entered by someone he never approved. Camilla said she had not intended to betray him. The queen consort spoke softly, almost pleading, but Charles reacted to one word more than all the others. Intended. The king heard it like a crack in the floor. It suggested something had happened, even if she claimed the damage had not been meant. William saw his father's face change. The prince stayed controlled, but the hurt in Charles was impossible to miss. This was not only a legal mistake. This was a personal wound opened in front of the people who knew him best. William chose his words carefully. The future king told Camilla the issue was not embarrassment, and it was not about punishing her for having private advice. It was about unauthorized influence over a royal process. Unauthorized means someone was involved without proper permission, and that detail mattered because private legal voices could shape, hear, or challenge matters meant only for approved crown channels. Camilla looked wounded by the words. The queen consort wanted sympathy, but William gave her clarity. He knew the monarchy could survive pain. It could not survive hidden hands near sealed papers. Anne then broke the room open. The princess revealed through a documented account from the palace security log that Camilla's solicitor had been seen near the legal corridor the previous evening. Anne did not make the moment dramatic. She made it worse by staying calm. The legal corridor was the restricted area where sensitive royal paperwork moved between approved advisors, and that made the solicitor's presence feel prepared, not accidental. Charles turned back to Camilla, and she finally admitted she had asked for advice about protecting her position. Camilla's admission changed the air. She insisted she had been frightened, not disloyal, but Charles understood what the words meant. The solicitor may not have come for the family. He may have come for her interests. The king did not shout. He simply removed his wedding hand from the table, stepped back from the queen consort, and said the matter would now be handled under crown authority. Crown authority means the official power of the monarchy to control royal decisions, documents, and access. That one sentence changed everything, because it moved the crisis out of marriage and into power. Power inside a palace rarely looks loud. It looks like a pen being placed down before a signature. It looks like a sealed folder moved from one hand to another. It looks like Charles deciding that affection could no longer govern access. After the confrontation, the king did not ask who felt hurt. He asked who had authority. And in that question, Camilla's influence began to shrink. Charles moved with painful control. The king invoked royal household authority, meaning the official power used to manage palace access, staff movement, private documents, and protected family procedures. He ordered the will reading frozen until every name, every clearance, and every step around the room could be checked. That decision mattered because the issue was no longer only about one solicitor. It was about whether private loyalty had been allowed to bend a royal process. And if that could happen once, it could happen again. So William was brought in quietly, and the prince understood why. The future king had to see how the monarchy protected itself when marriage and governance collided. Governance means the system of control behind decisions, rules, and responsibility. And in this crisis, it was the line Charles could not allow Camilla to cross. The king felt the pain of acting against her, but he also knew hesitation would make him look weak before his family and the household. A monarch can survive being disliked. He cannot survive looking uncertain when authority is challenged. Camilla sat alone after the meeting, and the silence around her felt like judgment. The queen consort gripped the arm of her chair as the meaning settled in. Charles had not chosen comfort. He had chosen procedure. Procedure means the fixed steps used to keep serious matters fair, controlled, and protected. And that word now stood between husband and wife like a locked gate. Camilla had spent years building a place beside the king, yet in one morning, she felt that place narrow. Anne did not waste time on sympathy. The princess followed the paper trail with the cold focus of someone who trusted records more than explanations. A senior legal officer confirmed through a written security account that the solicitor's access card had been activated through a temporary clearance request. Temporary clearance means short-term permission to enter a restricted area. And that detail mattered, because it proved the man had not simply wandered into the wrong room. Someone had given him a path. Charles demanded the full log. The king wanted the clearance chain reconstructed, meaning every approval linked together from the first request to the final entry. Anne then found the request attached to a routine household file, hidden so neatly it almost looked harmless. But harmless was the most dangerous disguise of all. William saw the name attached to the approval, and his face hardened before he could stop it. The fallout began the moment that name reached the king's desk, because now the palace had proof that someone had opened the wrong door. By morning, the palace was no longer pretending this was a scheduling issue. Offices went quiet. Doors closed faster. Phones were answered with fewer words. Charles's cancellation had become a command felt through every corridor. Camilla's circle was suddenly being watched. William's team was brought closer, and Anne moved through the household with the icy focus of someone who had seen enough. Charles allowed no soft language now. The king ordered an internal review, meaning a private examination inside the palace, to check who entered, who approved access, and who handled sensitive papers. That review mattered, because the postponed will reading had touched more than family inheritance. It had touched control. If the palace could not explain how Camilla's solicitor reached that room, then every future royal process would look vulnerable. The monarch understood the danger. One wrong doorway had become a threat to the whole structure. Camilla withdrew from a planned family lunch, and that absence said more than any statement could. The queen consort knew every explanation now sounded like defense, and every defense made the wound look deeper. She stayed away because silence felt safer than another question from Charles or another cold glance from Anne. But silence also made her look isolated. The woman who once stood beside the king in difficult moments was now being kept at a distance from the very process that had exposed her circle. William felt anger under his restraint. The prince had learned that Charles had already been uneasy after the Clarence House dinner, and that knowledge changed everything. The future king realized his father had not acted from sudden suspicion. He had been watching the pattern form piece by piece. Royal legal channels, meaning the approved lawyers and officials allowed to handle monarchy-related documents, were now the only route permitted near the rescheduled process. That mattered because private advisors could no longer hover near decisions that belonged to the crown. Anne moved faster than anyone expected. The princess received a documented update from a palace official showing that Camilla's solicitor had requested access to a side room near the reading chamber before the main gathering began. A side room is a nearby private space used for waiting, briefing, or holding papers, and in this case, Its location made the request disturbing. The solicitor had not only appeared in the wrong place, he had been placed close enough to hear, receive, or pass information before the family arrived. Charles read the update alone, then folded the paper once. The king did not explode. He went quiet, and that was worse. William watched him absorb the final shape of the breach, while Anne waited for the decision she already knew was coming. Camilla's circle had been pushed out. The solicitor's movements had been traced. The will reading would not return to normal until one last conversation happened. Charles looked at his son and said there was something they needed to settle before the monarchy could move forward. That conversation would not happen in a council room, and it would not include advisors, only a father, a son, and the future they both feared losing. The turning point came without ceremony. Charles and William sat together with no aides, no secretaries, and no legal voices between them. For the first time since the cancelled reading, the king looked less like a monarch and more like a father carrying the cost of his own decision. William did not push him. He waited, and when Charles finally spoke, his voice carried the sadness of a man choosing duty over comfort. Charles had asked for that private meeting because the crisis had reached the heart of the family. The king was no longer dealing only with an access breach. An access breach means someone entered or received permission to enter a protected space without the right approval. And that mattered, because the will reading had been meant to stay inside a trusted royal circle. Now even trust itself felt unsafe. William understood the deeper danger. The prince knew his father was not simply correcting a mistake. He was facing the fear that private loyalty had become a risk to the crown. Charles admitted the cancellation had hurt him more than anyone realized. The king said he had defended Camilla for years, and questioning her circle felt like tearing into his own past. He did not say it with anger. He said it with exhaustion. The monarch had stopped the will reading to protect the process, but the cost was personal. Camilla had not only been his wife in that room, she had been the person whose presence was supposed to calm him, not force him to choose between love and law. William answered with quiet resolve. The future king told his father that protecting the crown sometimes means accepting pain before others understand why. The crown means the monarchy's authority, duty, and future held together as one institution, and William knew that authority could not depend on who felt wounded in the moment. Charles listened carefully. The prince was not attacking Camilla. He was trying to save his father from letting sympathy undo the decision he had already made. Charles then made the shift final. The king decided the will reading would be rescheduled under a new structure, with Camilla's outside legal circle fully excluded. That structure meant only approved crown legal officials could attend, review, or handle the documents. It mattered because the next reading had to prove one thing clearly: no private advisor, no personal solicitor, and no hidden interest would stand near royal inheritance again. William was asked to witness the revised process, not as punishment against the queen consort, but as proof that the next reign would inherit clarity, not confusion. Charles signed the order restoring control to the approved crown legal team. The king's hand moved slowly, but once the pen left the page, the decision could not be pulled back. William looked at the signed order and understood what had changed between them. His father had not only protected a document, he had shown him how lonely authority can become when family trust begins to crack. The palace prepared to explain the cancellation in careful words, but both men knew careful words would not hold for long. Once the outside world heard that a royal will reading had been stopped, the private wound became a public storm. By sunrise, the story had escaped the palace walls. Britain did not receive a full explanation, but it received enough. A cancelled will reading, a solicitor removed, a queen under scrutiny, a king forced to act. The image was impossible to soften. For a monarchy built on control, the most damaging detail was not what had been said, it was what Charles had refused to allow. Charles chose restraint, but restraint only made the mystery louder. the palace released a controlled statement saying a private legal proceeding had been postponed because of procedural concerns. A private legal proceeding means a closed process involving documents, advisors, and decisions not meant for public debate. And that mattered because the public now knew something behind palace doors had gone badly wrong. The king refused to let the statement defend anyone personally. He wanted calm, but calm looked cold. Camilla watched the coverage in silence. The queen consort had already faced doubt inside the palace, but now the outside world was weighing her loyalty too. Commentators focused on one missing detail again and again. Why had her personal solicitor been inside a royal family will reading at all? A solicitor is a legal advisor who represents a person's private interests, and that word carried danger. If he had been there for Camilla, then people wondered whether the queen's private interests had moved too close to the monarchy's protected decisions. William understood the damage immediately. The prince knew that once the public saw weakness in the process, the future of the crown became part of the story. Broadcasters framed the cancellation as the most personal royal intervention of Charles's reign. And that phrase cut deep, because a reign means the period when a monarch rules. This was not just a family argument anymore. This was now being measured against the king's authority, his judgment, and his ability to keep private conflict from becoming national drama. Then came the front page that changed everything. A major London newspaper carried a black and white image of Buckingham Palace gates, with the headline, "The reading stopped." Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered near the railings, not shouting, not cheering, just staring with the strange silence of people watching a private family wound become public history. The palace gates became a symbol. Behind them, Charles had stopped the reading. In front of them, Britain was now asking why. Camilla felt the loneliness of that question. The queen consort knew Charles had chosen institutional calm over personal defense, and even if she understood the reason, it still felt like abandonment. The king knew she would feel exposed, but he would not soften the statement. Delay now looked like fear. Explanation looked like weakness, so the palace moved quickly to complete the rescheduled process, before the public storm could grow larger. And when the family finally returned to the room, the question was no longer whether the will would be read, it was what kind of monarchy would emerge afterward. The second reading was smaller, colder, and final. No unexpected names, no outside solicitor, no room for private influence. Charles sat at the head of the table, older in spirit than he had been before the first attempt. Camilla was present, but changed. William was there as witness. Anne watched in silence. This time, the will was read. And with every sentence, the monarchy reclaimed what had almost slipped away: control. Charles allowed no weakness into the room. The king had ordered the rescheduled will reading to take place under strict crown supervision, meaning the monarchy's approved authority controlled who entered, who handled papers, and who could hear each sentence. That mattered because the first attempt had not only exposed a legal concern, it had exposed the danger of divided influence. If Camilla's private solicitor could appear once, then the palace had to prove he could never appear again. The monarch understood that this second reading was not just about inheritance. It was about restoring faith in the system itself. Camilla listened without protest. The queen consort was wounded, but she remained composed, and that restraint carried its own sadness. She knew her personal circle would never again be allowed near matters touching royal inheritance. Royal inheritance means the private transfer of family property, legal promises, and legacy connected to the monarchy's future. For Camilla, that boundary felt like punishment. For Charles, it had become protection. The king had chosen duty over comfort, and even she could see that the choice had cost him something he would never say aloud. William watched his father with new understanding. The prince respected the decision because Charles had shown that the crown could still correct itself before private interests became public damage. The crown means the monarchy's authority, duty, and future held together as one institution. And William now saw the loneliness hidden inside that power. The future king understood that one day he might face the same cruel choice: protect someone he loved, or protect the monarchy from the damage love could cause. Anne gave the final sign that mattered. The princess had said little, but after the reading ended, she offered one small nod, and everyone in the room understood what it meant. The old guard accepted the process as clean. The breach had been contained. The papers had been read under proper control. Charles then closed the folder himself, and that simple act carried the full weight of the crisis. The monarch had opened the wound by canceling the first reading. Now he closed it by taking back authority with his own hands. Charles left the room changed. Camilla left it quieter. William left it wiser. Anne left it certain that the monarchy had survived because the king stopped the process before loyalty and law became impossible to separate. This was the emotional verdict. Charles chose duty over comfort. Camilla lost the shield of unquestioned trust. William saw the burden he would one day inherit, and the crown endured because authority returned before the damage became permanent. There is no unfinished ending here, only the hard truth of a monarchy that learned, in one cancelled reading, that love may enter the palace, but authority must never leave the crown. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.